The record. All right. Well, good evening, everyone, to those of you that are here in person and to those of you that are joining us online. This is our fifth Atlassian community event for the year 2023. So we are kicking. We've got a lot of stuff to cover tonight as well as in the future. So if you're joining us for the first time, we're glad you're here. Feel free to join our group and I'll share more details towards the end here. But for tonight's ACE event, we're going to be doing a deep dive into boards in Jira. If you're joining us for the first time, a deep dive is where we look closely at some functionality within a specific area in Jira that we otherwise take for granted, and we uncover functionality that's there that's seldom used, but is useful to know that is there. So that's what our deep dives cover. And I said Jira I put understanding boards in Jira because we're going to be looking at how boards work in two different Jira products tonight. So I think we'll have time to do that, but let's go ahead and jump right into boards. So how many of you here use boards? And it doesn't have to be Jira specific. It can be any product. All right. So I think everybody here is pretty familiar with boards. So I won't bother to explain what boards are. I can say that looking at the history of boards from an Atlassian perspective, Atlassian came into the market early 2000s, and they started out as a bug tracking software, and that was around the time that the Agile movement was coming up, where the push for physical boards where you could track your work on Post-it notes across a physical board was coming into play. So Atlassian was I would consider one of the front runners into making a virtual board that worked pretty well. So most people that do use Jira will more than likely use a board. And so this interface that you're seeing right here should be pretty familiar to you. There are some visual differences between the on-premise version of Jira, which we refer to commonly as Jira Server or Jira Data Center. And what you're looking at right here is the version that's on the cloud, but the concept is still the same. You're able to move your cards or tickets across your board until they are done. And for most of us, that's all we need to ever know about boards, but there's other functionality that's running under the hood that makes boards more useful. And because this is a common access point for data in your system, there is a reason why that functionality is there. So let's talk about boards and how they're viewed within a Jira perspective. So I want to spend a couple of minutes here talking about the location of a board. So if you are familiar with using the on-premise version of Jira Server, then you are likely familiar with the system navigation bar. You have a dedicated dropdown for boards, and any recent boards that you have worked with will appear in your dropdown. So on your on-premise versions of Jira, boards would be like a first-class citizen, for lack of a better term. They're front and center, they're primary, you can access them pretty quickly, and you're able to go your merry way. In the cloud, boards still are important. However, they have been relegated to living within a project. So you'll notice here in cloud that the system navigation does not include a dropdown for boards, which means you have to take a couple of extra steps in order to access a board in the cloud version of Jira. And to access your boards in Jira Cloud, you would need to navigate to a particular project that supports boards. And then within that project, you will see a little drop down in the page level navigation that allows you to view your different board views. And if you click on this top option here, you can look at other boards that may exist within your project. So boards are still important in Jira Cloud, but they live within a project. So when you are creating a board, you want to specify the location to live within an existing project. Additionally, you do have the ability to associate boards to your personal profile. So if you want to create a board just for yourself that you have access to when you are creating your board, if you scroll down here into the general settings of your board, then click on location. Not only will you see a list of projects at the top, but at the bottom, you can make this a personal board. So you do have the ability to assign personal boards for yourself. They may be useful for like your individual task focused projects that you want a nicer interface to work against. So that's what I wanted to mention about board locations. Now let's talk about some of those board settings that are available. So the concept of a board in Jira, as I mentioned, it's not really like a first-class citizen. A board is merely a way to consume project data. And if you actually look at the database for Jira Server, Jira Data Center, you don't see a table called boards. You actually see a table that's called Rapid View, and that's really what a board is. So in Jira software, which is the product that Atlassian offers that's primarily used for development, you have two different kinds of boards at play. You have your Scrum boards and your Kanban boards. Interestingly enough, your Scrum artifacts and your Kanban artifacts live at the board level. They don't live at the project level. When you see the option to create a Scrum project or create a Kanban project, what really is happening under the hood is you're creating a general project with a Scrum interface or a Kanban interface on top of it. So whenever we're talking Scrum or whenever we're talking Kanban, we're talking about the board level, not the project level, because at the end of the day, your board is merely a rapid view into your data. So what we're looking at here is a Scrum board. While there is nothing here that explicitly says Scrum, I know that this is a Scrum board because I see sprint specific functionality right here. So you can see that there's the option to complete the sprint as well as how many days are remaining. How you name your sprints would also appear here as well. So we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into the configuration settings that are available for your Scrum boards. We'll compare that with the configuration options that are available in your Kanban boards. There's significant overlap between the two, but there are some functionalities that are unique to each of those board types. So in order to access the configurations for your board, you need to click the triple dots on the top right of your board, and you'll want to click on board settings. So I'll go ahead and click on board settings right here. Everybody that has access to the board would have the ability to access these board settings. Whether or not you have the ability to make edits depends on whether or not you're a board administrator. So to go through the general and filter options right here, you have your board name, you have your administrators. When you designate someone as a board administrator, they have the ability to go into this view of the board and make changes that affect only that particular board's configuration. We already talked about location earlier. And in the filter section here, so this is an important point to note. All boards are driven by a filter. Your filter that you create determines what subset of data within your Jira system will be visualized and accessible within your board. So you could have 20 projects containing 200,000 issues in your entire Jira system, but only a subset of that information you may only want to see within a board. So if you have boards for tracking bugs in particular versus stories or tasks, you could create boards that way. And the way to make that distinction is by specifying that in your filter. Fun fact, when we were talking about filter configurations back in January, we talked about how you could share filters with other people. And we had talked about how you could share filters with groups of users or with people that have access to a project. If you find yourself in a situation where you're not able to access a board, but someone else can, then to debug that, check the filter shares. And then you would basically determine if the user that says they don't have access, you'd want to check to make sure whether or not they are listed in any of the shared options right here. So this filter has no shares, so no one else can see it really except for me. But you see the ability, you see who has the ability to edit this filter, and you can see that, belonging to this site admins group or even just having access to the mobile dev project gives you that access. There's other options here. You can see the filter query ranking that allows you to, as you drag and drop tickets or cards in your columns or backlog view, that allows you to set the priority. The rank functionality, that is a field in Jira. but it's an alphanumeric value. So you can't go in and like set a particular value for the ranking field because rank is a field that works differently than other fields in Jira. So I get that question a lot. Don't try to set the rank value. You do have the ability, if you want to order your boards by something other than rank, such as priority or another custom field, you can do that by specifying that in the filter query. What that will do is that will automatically prioritize your tickets based on your order by clause that's listed in your query. So that means you wouldn't be able to drag tickets up and down in your columns or in your backlog if you're ordering by priority, for example. So by default, highly recommend stick with the ranking functionality that's there. Just makes it easier for you to ad hoc prioritize tickets. Any questions before I move on, either in person or online? All right. Columns is probably the most familiar aspect of a board configuration that we're used to. So the idea within either a Scrum board or a Kanban board, once you associate workflows to your project, those workflows contain different statuses. But you have the ability within your board to specify which statuses on your workflow should map to which columns on your board. So by default, you'll probably create a column for each status that exists in your workflow, but you do have the ability to double up. You do have the ability to exclude certain statuses from your board. So you can see that the unmapped statuses here show viable and, statuses that exist within your project. But let's say you have a workflow that has 20 different statuses. As crazy as that sounds, it is very much a reality in some very complex use cases, right? But you don't want to have a small horizontal scroll bar that allows you to scroll through all 20 different columns. So if you run into a situation like that, you could choose to break up that workflow. So instead of having a single board with 20 columns, you could have multiple boards. Each of those boards would capture a subset of those statuses. And then that would make things a little bit more manageable that way. Other options on here, you have the ability to constrain the number of issues that appear within each column. So if you're trying to avoid bottlenecks and basically ensure that work keeps flowing, you can set like an upper limit so that once that limit is reached, you're not able to move any other work through unless you clear the bottleneck that exists in a column. Swim lanes are pretty much your like horizontal rows, if you will. So, columns allow you to visualize your data vertically. Swim lanes are, allow you to do that horizontally. So you have a number of different options right here. A common configuration that I see is being able to configure swim lanes based on queries. So that allows you to specify which subset of tickets on your board appear within a specific swim lane. I can't remember if this board had an example of that. It did not. So let me see if I can configure that. All right, so let's do unassigned. We'll base swim lanes based on assignees. Okay, so you can see here, if you wanted to break up your board and make it clear which team members are working on what, by setting your swim lanes to be based on assignees, anytime your assignee changes, then your issues will fall within the appropriate swim lane. Quick filters allow you to filter the data that already appears on your board to an even smaller subset of data. So with quick filters, you have the ability to specify additional queries. The caveat that I want to point out here is that these quick filters are built on top of your board filter. So if you have a board that is pulling data from 2 projects, for example, and you wanted to set a quick filter that only shows you data from 1 project, you can do that. But if you wanted to set up a quick filter that shows you data from 3 other projects that are not included on your board, it's not going to work. So your quick filters live on top of your board filter. Whatever queries you specify in here will run against the data that's included in your board filter. Card colors will create like a little color strip on the left-hand side of your card when you're looking at your board. That's a nice little visual indicator if you are trying to figure out how to quickly categorize your board as you are scanning it. If I were to base these colors on assignees, then for each assignee that exists currently, I have the ability to set a specific color for that individual. So a cool team activity would be to set favorite colors if you wanted to use card colors based on assignee. And you can see here what that little card color vertical strip would look like. So it differs based on the assignee. And it's not in your face. I know I've gotten some questions about why doesn't the whole color or I guess why doesn't the whole card show the entire color? Why is it just limited to a single strip? And I think part of that may be due to accessibility as well as not having a clash of colors, if you will, to make the design people happy. That last reason is totally unofficial and made up on the spot, but you do have the ability to use card colors if you need to.
And
Yes.
Jira also displays different background colors for cards based on priority settings too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll talk about, yeah, so you do have the ability when you flag certain cards on your board, then it will highlight the entire card in a different color. So you'd have a little bit of interference and overlap there, and then it would be hard to figure out which one takes precedence.
Depending on how many assignments and cards you have, you just jump in. You lose a lot of information.
Yeah, so
The wall for it.
mhm. Yeah, and the in-person comment here was it could get pretty crazy if you have a plethora of assignees or other data points that you're basing your colors on. So the card layout allows you to show additional fields on your cards. So if I go back to the board here, the default information that appears on the card, you'll see your summary. If your ticket is associated with an epic, you'll see a little epic badge appear here. You'll see the issue type, you'll see the priority, you'll see an estimation if your board is using estimation, and you'll also see the assignee and the ticket number or the issue key. The card layout allows you to include up to 3 additional pieces of information. So it's divided into 2 sections. The active sprints will show you 3 additional fields on each card when you're looking at the board view. And then the backlog section will show you 3 additional fields for cards that you are looking at in the backlog view. So let's just set up a couple of examples right here. I will go ahead and put the due date on the active sprints view. And let me see if I can find components, and I will add that here. And then in the backlog view, if I'm prioritizing, I will go ahead and add the fixed versions. I won't do that because that would also appear in the backlog view just by default. But I will show the number of watchers, for example. So now if I go back to the board, you'll see that my cards grew a little bit in height with that configuration. If there are values associated with the fields that you have chosen to add, they will appear here. Otherwise, they'll say none. If I were to switch to the backlog view, you can see that when I add additional fields to the backlog view, they will make your row a little bit taller, and you'll see that extra information below. So you do have a little bit of flexibility as far as what you can see. Some limitations to the card layout is that you probably don't want to add fields like description because those are paragraph or text area fields. So they could get really large and they could make your board look a little unwieldy. So highly recommend sticking to fields that show just a little bit of information. And then if you need to see more, you can click into the card and see additional information as well. Estimation is an option that allows you to specify on your board, how do you want to estimate your work? You can choose to estimate it based off of story points. You can choose the original time estimate, or you can use any custom number field that you've created in your system if you don't want to use the options that are available. So everything from cost and below, you can see that these are all custom fields that were created in this instance. They're not system fields, but you do have the ability to go outside the box and use whatever fields you want to track your estimates in.
So, for instance, would it allow you to track t-shirt sizes?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question is, would you be able to set an estimation statistic based on t-shirt sizes? The answer is no, because the values that you put in there would not be numbers, and you're limited to, as far as custom fields, you're only limited to your explicit number fields. Yeah. Now you could do a mapping like 1 equals extra large, 2 equals large, but then that kind of defeats the purpose right there, right? But yeah. And then if you choose to track your estimation based on time instead of points, you do have a time tracking section right here, which will either use the story points for rendering your burn down charts, or it will use the remaining estimate and time spent. So as I mentioned here, this estimation section is only configurable on a Scrum board, on a Kanban board. This would not exist. Working days allow you to set working days, and you have the ability to set non-working days such as holidays. That allows you, when you're looking at your burn downs, to see a proper burn down, and it doesn't look like your team's falling behind if your team decides that they're not going to work on Christmas, which I hope that is the case. Issue detail view. So this is kind of a view or a configuration that's kind of going away because of the new issue view that's coming in Jira Cloud, or that already is out there in Jira Cloud. But this is kind of a remnant, and you'll see this on Jira Server, Jira Data Center. But when you click on a card in your board and you see that issue appear on the right side, if you're on premise, you have the ability to specify what information appears in that preview mode. So this is different from the card layout because this will show you additional information when you interact with an issue on your board, and you see that dedicated section pop up on your board. Whereas the card layout will show you what is there in the card without having to click anything. The roadmap is a new piece of functionality that is available in Jira Cloud. What this allows you to do is schedule your work, and you can view it in a timeline view similar to what it looks like right here. So the idea here is for each row, you have your epics, and then if you have stories within your epics, you'd be able to expand your epic and see that. And on the right-hand side, you'd be able to schedule and say, well, I think this epic will take about 2 to 3 months. And then this other epic, which depends on this previous epic, we should start that later. This just gives you a more visual way to schedule your work. And so you have the ability to enable it. Once you enable the roadmap view, then you have some options for how you want to schedule child issues, such as your stories and tasks. And you can choose to schedule them by sprints or by dates. And when you enable the roadmap view, then over here on the left-hand side, you'll see a roadmap option appear. So I turn that off and the roadmap option disappears. So you have the ability to toggle features on and off, and I just turned that off. So great. And then this last option here is called Insights. So this is something that's fairly new to Jira software, and it's available in cloud, but you have the ability to indicate which insights you want to view from your board or from your backlog. So what's nice about the insights available in each view is that you have specific metrics that will appear based on what you're looking at. So if you're looking at the board, you'll see things like your sprint progress, sprint burn down, and your epic progress. Whereas if you're looking at your insights in your backlog view, you can see your commitment and your issue type breakdown. What does that look like in practice? Well, let's go back to the board. Over here on the top right of the board, I'm in the backlog view. It says backlog. I've got that selected. If I click on insights, here is a nice, easy way for me to see what's going on at a very high level. So before, if you wanted to see information like this, you'd have to go to a custom report that you've configured on your dashboard, or you'd have to go to the reports section right here. Now this information is front and center and easily accessible. If I go over here to the board view by clicking on active sprints, I click on insights, I can see things like sprint progress, issues that need attention, as well as epic progress. So you get some nice little metrics there, and it makes the ability to monitor your sprint progress and your development progress that much easier. As I mentioned, your insights are only available in Scrum boards, and they're currently only available in the cloud version of Jira. So that is new functionality that is out there. All right. Some other information I want to show you here is if you click on this triple dot menu, we've spent all our time going through the board settings, but there are other options that are available right here. You have the ability to hide your menus, which will collapse all that extra stuff at the top. If you want to show the detail view, then that is not working. So I'll have to figure that out later. Moving on, you have the ability to specify whether or not your issues will appear in a sidebar or whether they'll appear in a dialog. So right now, if I don't make any changes and I click on an issue, I'll see a nice dialog appear on top of the board, which will show me all of the issue information. And that may be preferable to some, but to others, that may not be ideal. You may prefer the behavior that you're used to. And so when you click on that option to open issues in sidebar, then you can see that every time you click on a card on your board, you'll see that information appear on this side as well. So that's a matter of preference. The default is opening up your issues in dialog, but you have the ability to control that. I can't remember if this option is configurable by user or if it's configurable by the board. If somebody online or here in person knows that distinction, please let me know. I haven't had a chance to test that.
At least in the data set, I think it's configurable by project.
Okay.
It's in the project settings.
Okay, gotcha. Awesome. Well, that functionality is configurable here on the board in cloud. So that option is there. You can choose to expand all your swim lanes or collapse all your swim lanes if they exist. You can choose to hide your epic labels to see more information in the available screen real estate. Some functionality that's not readily used, but you do have the ability to print your cards. And clicking on that will format your information. It'll show you all the information that you specified to appear on your card view. How would you use this information? If you have or you are maintaining a physical board, or you want to do additional work and you need something tangible in your hands, you can always print your cards, cut them out, and do some crafty stuff with them. So that option is available there. Just out of curiosity, has anybody here online or in person used that print cards functionality? No. Okay. Well, if you do start to use it, let me know how it goes. I'd be curious to know how you use it.
I did use it.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
I did.
Okay, so Trello has that functionality where you can print cards and you used it. And how did it work? Was it pretty straightforward?
It was okay.
It was okay. Okay.
It usually ended up containing one card per sheet of paper, which was not the most optimal.
Oh, okay. So you had one card per sheet of paper. So you had a very massive board or wall at home, right? Gotcha.
Yeah, we ended up like folding them in half so that they board, but
Gotcha.
yeah, we did actually print them out and put them on a physical board
Okay.
before the pandemic, before everything changed.
Right.
So the user card to go to the page. Yeah.
So the conversation here with the Trello printing card, the card took up the entire page as opposed to this option right here where you actually get card sizes for your different issues. So. All right. The last thing I want to point out before we move on, if you see this little lightning bolt icon right here, if you hover over it, the tooltip shows automation. So right now in Jira Data Center and Jira Cloud, you have access to the automation library. What's nice about your automation rules is your automation rules are not just based on events that occur on your issues or tickets. You have the ability to create automation rules that are manually triggered. So if you want to send an email like ad hoc, or if you want to update certain fields ad hoc, or any other type of any other type of automation that you'd want to manually control as opposed to, moving a ticket between columns, you can create those manually triggered automation rules. When you click on this board, then you'll see those manually triggered automation rules appear here. What's nice about those manually triggered automation rules is that you don't have to make them open to everybody. You can actually restrict their visibility based on groups. So you might have manually triggered automation rules that perform certain functionality that you wouldn't want your average team member to execute. So don't feel scared of using manually triggered automation rules simply because you don't want someone to update information in your system or perform external actions as a result. you have the ability to restrict that. All right, so we talked about the automation rules. We did talk about the rank field. Let's take a look at a Kanban board, which again, very similar to what you would see on a Scrum board in terms of visual interface and overall functionality. But if I go into the board settings right here, a couple of key differences I want to point out is that in a Kanban board, in the general filter settings, you do have the concept of what is called a sub-filter, which will automatically filter whatever information you include in your board out. So the default option right here is to only show issues that are associated with the fixed version that's unreleased or that haven't been associated to a fixed version. So a fixed version, if you're familiar with that, you would take your cards, you would assign them to a fixed version, and then when all of that fixed version is done. I'm sorry, is there a question? Okay. So if you're assigning your tickets to a fixed version and all the tickets in that fixed version are done and you complete it, you can choose to release the fixed version. And that very act of releasing that fixed version will make the cards associated with that fixed version disappear from your board. So you don't have fixed versions from yesteryear still appearing on your board and you have to create custom filters to hide that information. That's something that can happen behind the scenes. The other option is you do have the ability to hide completed issues older than a time frame specified here. So if you've moved tickets over to your rightmost column and they're marked as done, 2-3 weeks later, you probably don't want to be seeing those tickets in a Kanban board. So this option will automatically make those tickets disappear from your board. They don't disappear from your project. That information is still visible. You can still search for those issues, but from a board perspective, they would disappear. You don't see these options in a Scrum board because your Scrum boards are tied to sprints. Your sprints are time boxes. So when you hit that complete sprint button, then all of the tickets from that sprint, if they were completed, get filtered out. If they weren't completed, you have the ability to move them on to the next sprint. In any case, because you have a specified time box, you don't need this extra board functionality right here. And on a Kanban board, the reason why this functionality is here is to help with board performance. If you include too many issues on your boards, then you may notice that if it's taking forever for your boards to load, it's probably because you're including too many issues in that board. So you may want to look at adjusting that board filter so that your board is more performant and people will use it. All right, so that covers boards between Scrum and Kanban. Just a quick recap. When we talk about Scrum, when we talk about Kanban within a Jira specific context, those concepts, those agile methodologies are tied to boards and boards only. The Scrum and Kanban specific functionality you would find in your board settings, not your project settings or anywhere else in Jira. And the settings that I've shared with you today are settings that are found in what is called a company managed project in Jira. So we had an event about this last year, but a company managed project in Jira is one that's centrally administered. I don't want to say it's your legacy product, but it's the type of product that's been around for a while from Atlassian's perspective. So that's why a lot of functionality is available in your company managed projects. But I do want to pivot over and talk about board functionality within what is called a team managed project. So for those of you that are unfamiliar, team managed projects basically shift the administrative responsibilities to the team that owns the project. It's not administered by your Jira administrators, the people that are in charge of all of your projects that exist within your Jira environment. So your team managed projects, think of them as like a siloed off area where configurations and data can happen. And so that's what a team managed project is. It's a fairly new concept in Jira. Some of you may know them as next generation projects. And the idea here is to give your teams an option to control their own configurations and management of their data without having to go through a central Jira administrator. With the new team managed project functionality in Jira, we see a different approach to managing your data, which is why we don't have feature parity between team managed projects and company managed projects. They're two different types of projects for two different use cases. But from a board specific perspective, when you are in a team managed project, you'll notice that I'm in this team managed project. I know that because on the bottom left-hand side, it says you're in a team managed project. But in a team managed project, you only have one board. So if I take you back to your company managed projects, if I click on this drop down right here, I can see boards in the mobile development project. There are 2 boards in this project. If you had 3, 5, 10, or 1, you don't really have a limit to how many boards you can associate in a project, at least that I'm aware of. When you create a team managed project, because team managed projects are meant to be simpler to help your teams get up and running quickly, you only have 1 board. So you don't even see an option to click a drop down and switch between different boards in a team managed project. So you could view that as a limitation. You could view that as a wonderful thing because you don't have that added complexity right there. Other than that, your information still appears here as far as insights are concerned. You have the ability to filter by epic. You have your automation. You have the ability to star your boards. But let's go ahead and look at the configuration settings for a board in a team managed software project. So the first thing I want to point out is, again, very similar to your columns functionality in a company managed board. In a team managed board, you still map your statuses to different columns. You do have the ability to change the name of your column to be something different than what the status is. But you can see that that it renders differently. So in a company managed project, you'll notice that you had all of those unmapped statuses on the right-hand side. If I just go over there quickly. And what is pretty confusing about this is when I look at the unmapped statuses right here, I don't know which of those statuses apply to which workflows and to which issue types. But what's nice about your team managed project is that you have different swim lanes from a configuration perspective that will show you all of the statuses that are available for the workflow that's assigned to tasks versus the workflow that's assigned for epics and subtasks in this case. So it helps cut down on the noise there, and it allows you to see like, okay, when I move this status to this column, I know that it is affecting the issue types that are rendered right here. So that, I think, is an improved way of managing your columns. And if you need to add more columns, you can do so right here. Custom filters, that's very similar to your quick filters. You would just name your filter, add your filter query. They work very similarly to the quick filters that we just talked about earlier. And this is very Trello-esque if you were here for our previous ACE, but in a team managed project, you do have the ability to set an image as a card cover. And that just makes your tickets look nicer on your board if you need something really cool to look at, or if you want to preview an image without having to click into it, right? So that helps scanning the board and finding your issues a little bit easier. So this is definitely something that's, been adopted from Trello or inspired from Trello, but that functionality is available for your team managed software projects. And then of course you have the roadmap right here, and you do have the configurations associated with that as well. In a team managed software project, now remember, Jira software gives you the ability to manage your work in either a Scrum or a Kanban approach, and so you get functionality there. Because you're only limited to one board in a team managed project, you don't get to pick and choose an option where you say, I want this board to be Scrum, or I want this board to be Kanban. And the reason for that is Atlassian recognized that there are instances where different teams have different needs or they need different flexibility. So instead of hard forcing you into a specific framework with the functionality that's only available within that framework, the thinking behind your boards in a team managed project is that you can turn on or off certain functionality to make your boards work for you. So if you're using a Scrumban approach, you have the ability to mix and match some functionality across those frameworks to work a little better for you. And to do that, you would click on the features option. in your project. And you can see that there are a number of different features that are available right here. And you can see that I have the ability to turn them on or off, depending on if I need to use them. So you can see here as I scroll down, there's a number of different options that are available. If I wanted to use estimation on my board, I could do that by turning this on, and then I could go story points based or time based. If I turn this off, then I may not need estimation on my board, and I have the ability to turn that on or off. I can turn on reports if I want to view reports. I can turn on the backlog or the roadmap as well. And there's other functionality that's available in here. So you can see that the sprints functionality here is turned off, and that is because it requires a backlog. So right now, just looking at this feature set right here, this is a Kanban board, if you will. But if I turned on the backlog functionality right here and turned on sprints, then I'd be able to manage my work in sprints. So this approach of having a central feature section where you can toggle features on or off it seems to be the new thinking going forward from an Atlassian perspective. And it was how they were experimenting with what they used to call next generation projects, just to figure out what would work for people. And this is the result that came of it. So you get a little bit more flexibility from a team managed project in that you can pick and choose what you want to use or what you don't want to use. That keeps your boards lean. That prevents all the extra functionality or the extra bells and whistles that you may not use that are available on a company managed software board, but that option is there. So that's what board configuration would look like on a team managed level. Again, big difference is that the configurations are much more simplified, if you can tell, between team managed and company managed. I can't speak to whether or not we'll see more functionality roll into team managed projects. But right now, if you're looking to use certain functionality that's only available on your company managed boards, but not on your team managed boards, then the idea would be to just manage your data in a company managed project because the functionality is there. So within Jira software, as a quick recap, when you are using Jira software, you have the concept of boards, which are available for all of your projects. Within a company managed project, you have your Scrum boards, you have your Kanban boards. Within a team managed project, the concept is there, except it's a little bit more fluid. So that's what the lay of the land looks like from a Jira software perspective when it comes to boards. Now, I did mention at the beginning that we were looking at boards across multiple Jira products, which is why I said, which is why I named the title of this talk to be Understanding Boards in Jira. And the reason for that is fairly new Jira product that has come out, I think within the last year and a half, is called Jira Work Management. Jira Work Management is your Jira product for your non-development and your non-service teams. So teams in the business realm like legal, finance, marketing, so on and so forth. There's a number of different templates out there. If you're not developing anything, if you're not providing support, Jira Work Management is probably your product to choose. And we did have a demo on that earlier last year where we went through all of the functionality that was available. But in Jira Work Management, your data is broken down into different views that are available. You have your board view, you have your list view, you have your calendar view, and you have your timeline view. This is what your roadmap interface would look like on a board, by the way. You can see your issues appear here on the left-hand side, and then their time frame appear on the right-hand side. Within your board view, very similar to what you saw in a team-managed Jira project, you are only allowed to have one board in a Jira Work Management project. Within this board, you can see that the interface is pretty similar. You can search the board using free text. You can click on any one of these icons and it will show you tickets or issues that have been assigned to that person. When it comes to like a custom filter approach, you don't have the ability to create your own custom filters. You would be able to use the out-of-the-box filtering that is available right here. And you can choose to filter on, some custom fields. This dropdown actually is new, like within the last couple of weeks. So I haven't even seen this until now. So I'm glad I'm doing this event for me. But while you're not able to create and manage your own custom filters, you can filter against any of the options that are available right here. So a little less flexibility, but the options that are available here might be sufficient for you. While you don't have the ability to specify swim lanes within your Jira work management board, the group by functionality here does give you some swim lane functionality in the sense that you can pick and choose how you want your board to render. So by default, we're all used to each column referring to or being a status. But if you wanted to change your columns so that they are grouped by priority, then you could have a column based on, you could have columns based on priority, or even based on assigning. So now we're getting past that horizontal swim lane concept. And now each person or each assignee gets their own column, if you will. And you can drag tickets back and forth, and that will change the assignee. So you might have a team lead or the person in charge of this project use this grouping by option to quickly assign your tickets out from unassigned to individual assignees. And that might be a workflow you choose to take advantage of. And then there's a category field that's there, which gives you some customizability as far as when you set a value in the category field, you can group by that field as well. When you click on the more option right here, you have some additional options. Again, you don't have like a configuration area from an administrator perspective, but you do have the ability to do things like customize your cards. You have the ability to pick and choose which information appears on your cards. So in the past, the options were limited to just the category field down here, but recently they've been able to add more field options that I haven't seen before. So that's really exciting to see. You can even see some custom fields start to make an appearance in here. Other options. So going back to what we were talking about earlier with your Jira boards that may have multiple statuses from different workflows in your unmapped statuses column. What's nice about your Jira work management boards is if you have different issue types, such as stories or tasks, or, you know, you break it down differently, like tasks or subtasks or whatever. And let's say each of those issue types has a different workflow associated with it. You have the ability to change your board to only look at tickets that are associated with a specific workflow. So right now I'm looking at the board view for all marketing assets, subtasks, and whatever the additional issue type option is here. So all of the statuses that appear here or that appear here are statuses that appear in the configured workflow for these issue types. But now if I switch to tasks, let's say I wanted to look at just tasks within my Jira work management project. I can click on this, and I don't know if that was quite obvious, but you can see that the columns changed based on the workflow that I selected. And now I'm only seeing tasks. So while you don't have the ability to control which data appears in your board in a Jira work management project, you do have the ability where if you have multiple workflows configured for your project to switch between those workflows. Some of you may have run into those situations where you may have a very expansive board and you have different workflows for stories, bugs, tasks, but they all live on the same board. But it's not until you drag your cards across your columns that you realize, oh, I'm not able to drag this card into this column because this column contains statuses that are not associated with the card. So in Jira work management, you don't have the concept of a dead column. All of the columns that you see on a Jira work management board are columns that your tickets can move through. And that is because you're looking at the particular workflow. And then, of course, you have the ability to expand or collapse all columns. You can even do, you even have the ability to collapse columns individually if you want to get rid of that dreaded horizontal scroll bar. And that makes your data a little bit more manageable. So from a board functionality perspective, you know, from Jira work management is meant to get your non-technical teams up and running as quickly as possible. So most of the functionality or configurations options are limited, and that is partly by design. That's partly because, you know, Jira work management is a new product built with a different stack. And so they've been rapidly releasing features. And so what you see today may not be what's available or may be less than what you'll see in a month or so. So there's a bunch of new features that are added all the time. I even was surprised seeing the filter options here because I haven't seen that in the year and a half I've been using Jira Work Management. So this is a very quickly evolving tool, but if you are in a situation where you want to manage your data, but you're not developing anything, Jira Work Management might be your best course of action. There is one Jira product that I'm not going to cover in here because boards aren't really a thing, but if you've heard of Jira Service Management is used for your service and support teams. And so that project or that product type takes advantage of queues where you can click on a specific queue and you can see your data in a list form and work through your tickets in that order. And so as a result, the concept of a board does not exist in Jira Service Management. I know that there are some tickets out there to Atlassian to enable some sort of board functionality in Jira Service Management. Whether or not that gets completed, I don't know, but that's why we're not covering that in here today. So as a quick recap, boards are available to manage your work. They are primarily used in Jira software, and within Jira software, you have Scrum and Kanban boards. You have boards that differ in functionality based on whether you're in a company managed project or a team managed project. Just because you're not developing anything, that doesn't mean you get to take it. You're not able to take advantage of boards. You can always use Jira Work Management and the board functionality that's included out of the box to manage your work in that visual, if that's the visual that you prefer. And that is pretty much everything from a board perspective. Does anybody on the call have any questions, or anybody here in person have any questions or comments or concerns that I won't be able to address because I don't make this product?
That question didn't probably answer. I was just curious, when you make the changes on the board, does it have the same feature for like saving conversions as you go, or is it pretty much like, nope, we now change this from here to here, is it the history, or is that the same to X and it's the same to Y?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's a good question. So the question that was asked is, for your board functionality, do you have the concept of like a version control where anytime you make a change to the configuration, you can revert back to it or at least see an audit log of what changes were made? Answer is no. So that's kind of that.
Careful who give access to the configuration.
That's right. You have to be very careful who has access to the configuration. So oftentimes I will get questions because I'm a Jira administrator. I will get questions as ranging from, hey, can you make a change to this board configuration? And I try to nicely respond saying that, you or someone on your team should have the ability to do that because board administrators have control over their configurations. You don't need to go to a central admin group to get those changes made. So good question. Any other questions or comments?
Always have a backup board admin.
Always have a backup board admin. Okay. I feel like there is a story there somewhere.
Definitely.
In our future ACE event, we'll have a story time with Erica, and she will share and enlighten us with her experiences. So, yeah, you can always create backup boards that, you won't be able to designate them as backups, right? But they will appear here.
Well, you'll need another person too with perms, just in case somebody leaves and then you can't access the board or the filters.
Yeah.
That is a good point, Foy. I'm glad you brought that up.
I think that was what Erica was getting at.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, so that way you don't get cut off from functionality that you otherwise need. So as people that work on your projects, if you do have that responsibility for maintaining access, make sure that as your team changes, that you are periodically reviewing who has access to what within your project. Otherwise, you will need like a centralized Jira admin person to come and help you. So good point. Any other comments?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Concerning road mapping, we didn't, you touched on road mapping a little bit. I noticed it wasn't part of your, like a deeper dive into is road mapping considered another view or board into your project?
Yes, yep. And honestly, like if I show you the different options here within your board, these all reflect different views into your project. So let me see if I can
Mhm.
find a nicer example. Oh, this is the one that I just cut the functionality to.
And while you're setting it up, I have a specific question about like, I have a series of projects that are all actually a series of boards that all run against. Um, we have 5 sub teams or 5 teams that are running their own Scrum teams, and we have a periodic meeting where we get together with all the product owners. It's kind of a resource management and timeline management. So instead of having a 1 or 2 sprint look into our projects, we're looking at more of a quarterly view. And it would be nice if, and we're now doing a lot of data exports in order to facilitate that into other tools, to have a nice view where I can look at a particular team's product roadmap and say, this epic is going to be, in this sprint, which is 3 sprints away, and then like have a 6 or 10 sprint forward-looking view. Okay, so this is kind of what we're saying. These are epics. Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect. And so in this view, because in those meetings, we do a lot of what if scenarios, right? So we want to move things around and then see how it all lays out. When you're doing this, what you're doing now, adding these epics and moving them around, does that impact the sprint play, where those stories are placed in a sprint, or is this disassociated with the actual work that the cards, the stories that are in your project or in your backlog?
Yeah.
So I want to move it. Go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
So I want to like have this what if scenario where I can move things around in real time for my product owners and say, oh, we can lay it out like this, or we can lay it out like this, and have them kind of pick one and then be able to go back and apply that what if scenario and say, okay, I'm going to use this for real world planning now, and associate actual stories or tasks with and have those stories or tasks move with that epic in the way that was.
Yeah. So those are all some really good questions here. I didn't get too much into the roadmap functionality because this is another can of worms. Although with daylight saving time, we could be here for another hour and still go home before it gets dark, right? Well, I guess most of you online are at home. So I guess to just speak to your first point, when it comes to using the roadmap functionality within a board. So when you click on this roadmap option here within this board, this is what Atlassian would consider as a basic roadmap. So when it comes to like checking out different scenarios, as you were describing, Phil, that functionality is not supported at this level because it is a basic roadmap. Changes that you make to start and end dates, as well as links between your different epics, would be changing actual data on your ticket. So you wouldn't be able to hypothesize different scenarios based on different outcomes or different circumstances that you're adjusting. This would just be a simple, these are my epics, these are my stories. If I were to lay this out in a timeline view, what would that look like? Now, the functionality that you're describing that your team would probably benefit from would be advanced roadmaps. Does that term sound familiar to you?
Yeah, because I think I saw something on that somewhere, and I was looking around last week. I think I saw some marketing stuff that talked about, oh, you can do different.
Yeah, so with advanced roadmaps,
scenarios.
so with advanced roadmaps, everything that you just described would be supported with advanced roadmaps. Advanced roadmaps is available with Jira Software Premium. So, and that's available in the cloud. So you would need to upgrade if you're not on premium in order to see that. And you would know if you have access to advanced roadmaps if you see that plans drop down. But that's where you would get a view similar to this, but added capabilities such as, drawing different scenarios or adjusting levers such as time, scope, or capacity. And, you can make all those changes in your plan or in your roadmap without affecting the actual data. And if you decide to commit to one of those scenarios, you can hit a button and it will persist those changes down so that the rest of the team sees that. So I'm glad you brought that up. I just might do a future ACE on roadmap functionality. And we can
I'd really like to see that if you do, because that's kind of big issue right now is try to figure out how to do, because we're doing a lot of exports into different tools to make that work, and it's very time consuming, and it'd be great if Jira could incorporate all of that, where you could just switch a view and start
Mhm.
playing with different scenarios. So, and just
Oh.
one last question about that.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
I have epics that, that they may have 4 or 5 stories in them, and those stories may spread across multiple sprints, but there may be a gap where it's in sprint 100, but not in sprint 101, but it is in sprint 102. I'd love to be able to look at that, be able to, and that's what we do now using different tools. We're able to split up those, like on one single row of this where it says test 1 here, for example, show a bar in one sprint in April, and then show the next bar that's extends from June, July with a gap in between. That's probably a bridge too far for the functionality here, but is there anything like that? And you don't have to go into deep explanation. I'll wait for your next.
Yeah, that's a good
wait for your
question.
roadmap. Yeah.
Unfortunately, that gap functionality is not supported unless you take like a couple fingers and like put it on your bar to create an artificial gap, right? But yeah, in that case, you would have one continuous
Okay. Very
timeline.
good.
Yeah, because under the hood, when you are setting these schedules, you're really setting your start date and due date fields. So there are two fields that are being adjusted behind the scenes. So
Okay.
yeah, I do appreciate the questions, and I've made a note internally about possibly doing roadmap functionality in the future.
Yeah,
So
that would be, love to see that one.
speaking of the future, I do want to point out a couple of things. For those of you that joined us online, thank you for being here. If you've joined us for the first time, we do have a community group. If you go to ace.atlassian.com/Lansing, you can see our group is right here. You can join our group and you'll get updates on any upcoming events that occur, as well as other messages. Speaking of upcoming events, we have one scheduled for June 14. We'll be doing a demo where we will explore all of the reports that are available in Jira software. We typically do events once a month. I didn't get May's schedule on here yet, but in May, we're actually going to have a guest speaker. If you've heard of Mark Kruth, he's a modern work designer. He does a lot of research on teams and team architecture, and he'll be sharing some exercises that you can run within your teams to foster communication and collaboration. And he actually is one of the main researchers within Atlassian that produces what is called like a state of teams report. So him and his team of researchers, they'll compile data, they'll draw some conclusions as a result of it, and they'll publish that state of teams report every 6 months. So really engaging. I've heard him talk multiple times, always has good stuff to say. But if you're someone that works on a team, then that event is going to be beneficial for you. When we talk about Atlassian community events, we usually focus on like the tool and the functionality within the tool, but a tool is only going to get you so far, right? You're going to want to have the right environment that the tool can maximize so that your team is working hand in hand with the tool and vice versa. So that's why we'll have those kinds of events. That event is scheduled for May 11, which is a Thursday at 6 p.m. I'll get that posted up here soon. If you are a member of our group, you will be able to see that update appear in your inbox. And if you haven't joined, feel free to join us. And if you have any questions or suggestions for any future topics you'd like to see covered, please let us know. This is a community group. We're here to, learn together. And if you're interested in speaking as well, you're more than welcome to. Please let me know. And, hopefully my throat will last a little bit longer. But this group is available online. Feel free to join us. And, for some of our events, we have been recording our events and posting them to our YouTube channel. So just search for Atlassian Community Lansing. I can't guarantee that every event will be posted on here, but we will make an effort for people that want to go back and reference these conversations. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us there. So with that being said, I know we're a little bit over time, but I want to thank